Today I'm showing how you can create a simple trading panel, and I've got one showing here in the corner. I have a lot size, a buy button and a sell button. I have an earlier video where I show how you can capture screen events. So if you wanted to change this trade volume and capture the click events on here, that video will explain how to do that, but I'll also be covering it today. I'll leave a link in the description of this video to the earlier video. I'll also say this video is for MetaTrader 5. I have a similar video for MetaTrader 4. There's very little difference between them, but I'll leave a link in the description to the MetaTrader 4 video. Now, this panel is very similar to the panel, and I'll just open that up here, very similar to the panel that already exists on the MetaTrader chart. So you might ask why I would want to create this. It's not so much because the panel itself is very useful, but this is a good piece of code to start with, and you can extend it further. So if you were to simply click the buy or sell button here, you get a buy or a sell trade. But once you have your own code to do this, then you can add things like automatically adding a take profit or a stop loss, and you can even change this lot size to be based on an equity risk or something like that. I'll just flip over now and show you an example of an expert that is not this expert. It is one that uses a similar concept and just shows how it can be expanded to something more of a trading tool. So just as an example to show how you can extend the expert that we're about to write, and I'll point out the expert that I'm showing you here is not the same one that we're about to write. This is just to show the kind of things that you can do with it. So this particular expert doesn't have a buy and a sell button. It has a market trade button and a limit or stop order button. So I still have an edit here where I can enter the size of the lots that I want to trade. It has these little three indicators here with lines. I can drag these around, so I can set my stop loss down here, take profit here, and I can decide where I'm going to place the order. So a buy limit here because it's below the price. I can move that above the current market price. It becomes a buy stop. If I click the button, then it places my stop order here, and I've got an automatic take profit and stop loss at the levels where I set those earlier. If I just want to move this around a little, it turns it into a buy limit, as you can see when it goes below the price. If I move that outside the range of the take profit and stop loss, then obviously that's an invalid trade. So I get the invalid, invalid, and if I move back into the middle, I can reverse the order of these. If I move the take profit down here and the stop loss up there, then these become sell and sell stops. And if I move that up, then it becomes a sell limit. And if I want to, I can also just place a market trade. So you can see I've got a sell stop here, but if I click this sell button now, because the price is here, I'll still get a sell, and it will still have the stop loss at the stop loss level and the take profit down here at the take profit level, So that's just an example of what can be done. As I said at the beginning, this is not the expert that we're writing today. If you're interested in this particular expert, then stay around on the video and I'll come back to this at the end and explain a little bit more about it and where you can get this expert. Now, I've opened the MetaTrader 5 editor, but as I said in the beginning, the code is almost identical between MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. So what I'm going to do is write the code that's specific to MetaTrader 5 first, and then in the video, I'm going to edit in all of the code that I wrote for MetaTrader 4. I'm going to try to keep the line numbers set up the same, but if you do see something off screen that doesn't look like it's right for MetaTrader 5, that's probably because you're seeing something outside where I'm discussing that is from the MetaTrader 4 video. But all of the code that I'm going to show from the MetaTrader 4 video that I will edit in is absolutely identical for MetaTrader 5. So I've already created this simple order panel folder underneath my Orchard folder. I'm just going to right click that and new file, Expert Advisor, simple order panel. I don't need any of these things, so I'm just going to click through this. And that gives me the template. And as I said so many times, I really dislike the way this is laid out from the templates. So I'm just going to select everything and delete it. And put this back in. So it's much the same. I've just changed the formatting. This is the comment block at the beginning, the property, copyright, link, and version. And now the code that is specific to MetaTrader 5 is simply because when you place trades in MetaTrader 5, it's done through different code to MetaTrader 4. So for MetaTrader 5, I typically include the trade/trade.mqh. This is supplied with MetaTrader 5, and it just makes placing trades easier because it wraps up a lot of the code that you need to use. And then I declare an object of type ctrade. So ctrade is declared inside this trade.mqh file. So I'm declaring an object of type ctrade, and I'm just calling that trade. And then the OpenTrade function here has the same arguments in both MetaTrader 5 and MetaTrader 4. So I'm calling it from the common code the same way. It has the enum order type and a double for the volume. And it's called OpenTrade, obviously, in both MetaTrader 4 and 5. But the way that you place a trade in MetaTrader 5 is different. I'm calculating the price, and this bit of code is actually the same between 4 and 5. But if the type is an order type buy, then I'm using the ask price. And if it's not an order type buy, then I'm using the bid price to place the order. But then for MetaTrader 5, I place the order using the trade object, or using the trade object of type ctrade, dot position open, chart symbol, type, volume, price, and I'm putting 0 stop loss and 0 take profit here, and no comment. And that should be all of the specific code to MetaTrader 5. So what I'll do now is I'll edit in the video from MetaTrader 4 from this point on, because all of the code you'll see here is common. And then I'll come back here with the rest of the code, just paste it in, do a quick compile and wrap up. Now I am going to set up a number of constants. You could set these up using define statements, or you could embed these values inside the rest of the code. I'm going to be declaring them here as global variables using a constant type. And the first thing I've declared is the base corner. So the panel corner, I'm putting this panel in the upper right corner of the screen. So I'm setting my panel corner here as corner right upper. And these are all values that are going to be used in various function calls later. The next values I'm setting up are the gaps from the top and the side of the screen. So there's a Y margin, which is the distance from the top of the screen, and the X margin, which is the distance from the right. Now, these are only the distance from the top and the right because I'm using corner right upper. Obviously, they will be distances from the relevant margins if you change this from right upper to something else. Now I'm declaring gaps between the elements. So there's an X gap because I have two buttons side by side, and there's a gap, a horizontal gap between those. So that's the X gap, and I'm making that 10. And then there's also a gap between that edit box and the two buttons below. So that's a vertical gap, and that's the Y gap. And I just happen to be setting that also to a value of 10. So now I'm setting the actual size of the elements. The buttons have a width, and I'm setting that to 50, and they have a height, and I'm setting that to 20. And as I say in the comment here, I'm declaring the buttons first because the edit box is actually the width of the two buttons plus the gap in between. So I'm declaring the buttons first, and then I can calculate the width of the text box. And so here I've calculated the text width to be the button width multiplied by 2 because I have two buttons, plus the X gap in between the two buttons. And the height of that edit box is also 20. And now I'm going to put in the constants where I've actually calculated the locations of each of these three elements, of the edit box, of the buy button, and the sell button. So I've set in this comment caution placing in the top right because I've set the corner for this as the top right, but the measurements are to the lower left of each element. So when you measure the Y distance of an object, for example, it will be measured from the top of the screen to the bottom of the object. And if you measure the X distance, it will be measured from the right of the screen to the left of the object. Some objects will allow you to change that alignment so that you can actually measure to the right or to the top, but I'm not using that, and the buttons don't allow you to specify that alignment. All measurements for buttons are going to be to the bottom left of the button. So the first thing I've said here is the text X, so the X position of the edit box is going to be the X margin, so that gives me the gap on the right hand side, plus the width of that edit box. And then the Y position is of course the Y margin plus the height of that edit box. And then I'm calculating the sell button before the buy button. The buy button is actually to the left of the sell button, but I'm calculating the position of the sell button first because then the buy button is relative to that. And the sell X is just the X margin plus the button width, the same as it was for the edit, but I'm using button width here. And the sell Y position then is text Y, so I'm already below this text Y position, plus the Y gap, the gap between things vertically, and plus the button height. And then the buy X position is sell X position plus the X gap plus the button width. So I'm moving from the left of the sell button plus a gap plus the width of a button again. And I could just as easily have made this the same as text X because this is lined up at the left hand side of text X, and if you do the math here you'll find that these come out to the same value. And the Y position is text Y plus Y gap plus button height, but I could equally have simply said it's the same as the sell Y position because these two are lined up. And then I just have one more set of constants. I'm actually going to give these objects names and I'm going to declare those as constants as well. So my text name is just text underscore volume, then buy button. I'll actually make that buy underscore button. And sell button, there should have been an underscore there. And there are no inputs for this particular Expert Advisor. Everything you do is through the panel on screen, but I am going to set an initial value for the volume that is in the edit box. So I'm just declaring a double trade volume equals 0.01. And now the standard event handling functions. There's first the OnInit. The OnInit function, I've just got this one statement in here, CreatePanel, we'll get to that soon, and then just return init succeeded. And CreatePanel is where I'll actually draw these objects on screen for the first time. In the OnDeinit function, I actually want to delete these objects from the screen. So that's just the object delete statement. And in the object delete, the first argument is the chart number, 0 is the current chart, and that's where I want to delete these. And I'm using the constants for the text, the buy and the sell name. This particular expert just reacts to you clicking the buttons, so there is no code inside the onTick function. But then there is quite a lot of code inside the OnChartEvent because that's where we detect things like changing the edit box or clicking the buttons. And the first thing I want to look for is an edit of that edit box where you might have changed the volume. Now, I have an earlier video where I explained how to use things like chart events, and I'll leave a link in the description for that. But what I'm doing here, the ID will contain the ID of the event that's happened on the chart. So the first thing I'm looking for is that ID being a chart event object end edit. And that event happens when you finish editing that edit box by hitting something like return or by moving somewhere else on the screen. And I'm also then looking at sparam, this string parameter, which is the name of the object. And if that matches the text name, so if the ID is the end edit and the sparam is the name of the text box, then it means I've just finished editing that text box. I'm setting this volume text equal to object get string chart number 0, the name of the object, text name, and I'm getting the objprop underscore text, which is the text value. So I'm just capturing the value of the text from that object. The value of the object is not passed in any of these arguments. You have to go and get that yourself. The only thing that identifies the object is this sparam. And then I'm calling a function setVolume, passing in that volume text. So I've just encapsulated applying that volume, and that will actually set this trade volume to be the new volume that you've entered in that box. But it also does some validation on that volume text. And once I've done that, I simply call object set string chart 0, same object text name, setting the objprop underscore text, and I'm passing in string trade volume. So that simply converts that volume to a string. So after I've been through this verification of the volume, I've refilled the value in the text or the edit box. And I do that because if you've entered something invalid, then this will simply replace it with the old value. And then I just return, because there is nothing more to do if I've detected that it's a chart event, end edit, and it's the correct text object. So if this is not an end edit for the text or the edit box, then I have this else if the ID equals chart event object click. So now I'm looking at a click, which is relevant for a button. If the S-param is the buy name, so if you've clicked the buy button, then I perform this object set integer chart 0 buy button name obj_prop underscore state comma false. So buttons have two states. They are pressed and not pressed. When you click it, it will become pressed. So I'm simply resetting that, the obj_prop state, to false. And then I'm calling the OpenTrade function that we saw in the beginning, passing the order type buy and the trade volume, and then I just return. Now, I haven't built anything in here to check whether the volume that you've entered is a valid volume for this particular symbol, or whether we can actually place a buy trade. I'm just leaving all of that. All this will do is attempt to place that buy order for the volume you've specified in the edit box. And then I have the same code for the sell object. So it's still inside this if ID equals chart event object click, but if it's not the buy button, then it might be the sell button. So if the S-param is equal to sell name, and I do all the same things, object set integer 0 sell name, obj_prop state false. The only difference here is that I open trade with order type sell instead of order type buy. And that's the end of the OnChartEvent code. And now I'll just cover the SetVolume code. That's the code that's being called if you've edited the edit box. So it receives the volume text string, and then I'm simply converting that. So I'm doing double new volume equals string to double of that volume text, and then I'm comparing if new volume is less than 0, so that would be a negative, then I'm printing invalid volume specified. You might want to add more tests to this. So a volume of 0 is also invalid, so you might want to change that to less than or equal. You might want to check to see that the volume doesn't contain any strange characters. I've left this as a very simple test. Just if new volume is less than 0, then I'll print invalid volume specified, return. If I get to this point, then the volume is valid, and I simply then assign trade volume equals the new volume. So now the CreatePanel code, and this was called, let me scroll back up. Here in the OnInit function, I called CreatePanel, and this will draw those three objects on screen. And I'll just write this entire function and then I'll explain it all. So the first thing I'm doing here, I'm calling object delete. In case these three objects exist on the screen from a past iteration or something, then I'm just deleting them. And that's just an object delete, chart number 0, current chart, and then the name of each of those three objects. And then I'm calling these three functions EditCreate and, well, two functions, EditCreate and then ButtonCreate. So the arguments here are the chart number, 0, the name of the object that I want to create for the edit, the sub window, and I'm putting these on the main chart, not any sub window like you might have for an RSI indicator that would be in a sub window. I'm putting these on the main chart. The X position, text X, and the Y position, text Y, the width, the height, and I should have wrapped this around, but I'll just move across. The initial value for the edit box, which is the trade volume converted to a string. The font name, I'm leaving this as Arial. The font size. The text alignment of that edit box. And this next argument says false, but this is actually being passed in as the read-only argument of this edit object. So if I passed in true, then it would be a read-only edit. If I pass in false, then it becomes editable. The alignment on screen, that's the panel corner constant that I set up at the beginning. The text color, the background color, so this will be black text on a white background in my case. There's a border around that edit box, and I'm making that a black border as well. Then I've got three arguments: false, for this being a background object, it's not a background object. Is the object selected? No, it's false. And is the object hidden from the object list? And that's also false. And then finally the Z order 0. So I'm putting this at the front of the screen for mouse clicks. Now this EditCreate is a function that we'll get to in a moment. It's not an inbuilt function, but I just thought I'd explain the arguments to that, and then it'll make a little more sense when you see the EditCreate function. The ButtonCreate function, very similar. Still chart number 0, object name, subchart, X position, Y position, width, height, and then the corner, because there is no editable value here, so this argument doesn't exist. The label on that button, that's a buy button. I have again the font and the font size. There's also again the text color, the background color, and I'm actually making the background color different between the buy and the sell buttons. And then the border color. Then there's a state. Remember I said when you click the button they become clicked, and I'm resetting that. So I'm starting these out as not pressed. And then the same three arguments: background, selected, hidden, and the Z order 0. So these are in front of the chart for clicking. And of course the cell is the same except for the name and the label and the color. Now these two functions, EditCreate and ButtonCreate. When I create the edit object, I'm creating an object of type obj_edit. And when I create a button object, I'm creating an object of type obj_button. I've just typed these two names here, objedit and obj_button, and I'm going to just click that. I'm not selecting the whole thing, I'm just clicking it, and then press F1 to bring up help. And I get this help with object types, and I can search for objedit, which is here. Click objedit, and conveniently MetaQuotes have given me this function EditCreate. Just scroll so I can highlight all of that. And I'm simply going to highlight all of this object create function, copy that code, and paste it there. And then just scroll back up here. I'm going to do the same for the obj button. I still have the help here. I can go back and go to obj button, and they've also given me all of this code for ButtonCreate. So it's much easier than writing your own code. They've already created these functions for me. So now that you've seen all of that code being written, I'll just do a quick compile to make sure that all works. And it does. And as I said, this code at the top is specific to MetaTrader 5, and everything below here is common for MetaTrader 4 and 5. I would normally not put this function here at the beginning of the code. I would typically put it somewhere later, but I've put it here just so that I can have all of the specific code at the top of the MetaTrader 4 and the 5 versions. This code is going to be available for download, and I'll leave a link in the description where you can get the download of this code. Thanks for staying around to see more of this Expert Advisor. It basically gives three levels: a take profit, a stop loss, and an order level, let's say. And then there are two buttons, one that places a market trade and one that places an order. Whether this is a limit or a stop order is dependent on where this trade line is in comparison to the current market price. Let me move these lines around a little bit first. So stop loss and take profit. The relative direction of these, so if take profit is above stop loss, then I'm in a buying mode. If I put the take profit below and the stop loss above, then you can see these have changed to sell because I'm now in a selling mode given that the profit is below the stop loss. You can use these lines basically to find areas of support and resistance and place your trades there. So if I look at this chart, there's a kind of support resistance line along here. So I can take this point, drag it across there until I'm happy, release that, and the take profit has now moved down to this line. That will snap back in a few seconds. I've got the delay on this set at I think 10 seconds. So that will snap back to this point after 10 seconds. There we go. I can do the same with the stop loss. If I said this looks like a reasonable level, I can come up here, or I could say that that's a better stop loss level, or I might even say down here somewhere. I can set that anywhere I like. And there I have a stop loss. And then where I want to place my trade, I'll do the same with the sell. I'll just drag that out. I might want to sell at this point. So that goes through a couple of points there. That could be a reasonable support resistance level. So now I have take profit below the stop loss, therefore it's a selling mode. I have a sell stop here, and that's a sell stop because it is below the current market price. If I move that up and put it above the market price, it becomes a sell limit. And if I then click the sell limit button, you'll see that I now have a sell limit order placed here at the same level as that line. I have a stop loss here and a take profit here. And I'm ready to adjust this now for the next trade. Now, one thing you might find if you simply try to drag this point here, if I place my mouse over that and I try to drag it, it's going to drag this trade. So I've built something in here that if I just click that, then this line automatically extends all the way across the screen for one thing, but also the trades have disappeared from the screen. And then I can move this without worrying about moving the trade. And once that 10-second delay is up, the trades will appear again and this line will snap back to that point. I don't need to wait for that. I can start moving these others around. You can see here the trades have come back already. I can do the same with any of these. If I click that take profit, for example, the trades disappear and the take profit line is now extended all the way across the screen. If I click the stop loss, the trades disappear and the stop loss line extends all the way across the screen. And that's useful if you want to do things like extend these lines and then scroll the chart backwards to set these. So I can drag that out here, and then if I turn off the auto follow, move out, and I can drag that a little further until I find whatever I'm looking for on the screen as a relative level. If I move the sell stop outside the range of the stop loss take profit, you can see that's become invalid. You can't place a sell stop or a sell limit if it's outside the range between the stop loss and the take profit. So this simply becomes invalid. You can see that the button has changed to invalid. The market level though is still valid because I'm going to be placing a trade at this market price if I click that sell button. And that's still valid then for the stop loss and take profit. But if I move this stop loss so that it's below that current market price, I can't place a market trade here with a stop loss here. Not a sell anyway. So that becomes invalid. If I now move the take profit back, oh, I forgot my own instructions. If I move the take profit above the market price and the stop loss below, now it becomes a buy. So this is a very simple trading tool. You enter the size of the trade here. And if I now just click the buy button, it's simply going to place a market order here at the level of the current market price, but it has used the stop loss and the take profit for the stop loss and take profit levels. If I move that invalid back inside that range, then that becomes either a buy limit or a buy stop, depending whether I'm above or below the current market price. So that's a quick rundown on how this expert advisor works. It is an expert advisor, not an indicator, because it can place trades. So you still need to allow it to place trades. If you're interested in this, I'm not releasing the code for this expert advisor, but you can download the expert from our website. You can download it and run it on a demo account. If you want to run this on a live account, you can also download it for a live account, but you do need a license for that. The license will cost you nothing. And I'll leave instructions on the website how you can obtain the license. And when I say will cost you nothing, This is through a sponsorship agreement, so this will cost nothing for you to run on a live account if you have signed up for an account through one of our affiliated brokers. So I'll leave instructions on the website for that if you're interested in this particular expert advisor. But as I say, the code for this is not available. Until next time, thank you for watching.